2nd, 2025 work session of the York County School Board. Being our final meeting of the year, the board would like to thank everyone for their dedication and support throughout the year. Please note that a special meeting will immediately follow tonight's work session. Before we begin, we'd like to extend a heartfelt congratulations to the class of 2025 who will be graduating next week. We are so proud of your accomplishments and we wish you the best in this next chapter. All right, without further ado, let's begin. Dr. Shandor.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Goodwin, board members, we have 3 presentations this evening, then I believe we have 2 discussion topics. So we're going to start off with Ms. Christina Head, our former Associate Director of Elementary Instruction and Academic Programs. She walked out Friday to bells and whistles retiring, but she was gracious enough to come back and do this one last assignment. She's going to provide a summary of student performance on the spring 2024-25 Virginia Language and Literacy Screener System VALS. And this will be her last presentation for YCSD as she's retired. Also, I did want to add that she has 0 pressure on her this evening. So, Ms. Head, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so good evening. So tonight I am going to share the kindergarten through 2nd grade VALS data from the spring administration. And so in this presentation, I'll briefly explain the new VALS assessment again and speak to the spring data as well as the wristband ranges which change for each testing administration. And then I'll show you the data dashboard with the spring results. And after I share the spring results, we'll take a look at some of the action steps we'll do to support students. And so you are quite knowledgeable on the new VALS assessment, as I, in November and March, provided presentations on the new literacy screener as well as the data results from the fall and the mid-year. But before I start to share the spring results, I just want to do a quick recap of some of the specifics about this new literacy screener for the public at home as well. So this is a state-required screener for literacy, and it's called VALS, and it stands for the Virginia Language and Literacy Screener System. And it's provided to students in kindergarten through 2nd grade and selected 3rd graders in the fall, mid-year, and spring. And it measures critical literacy skills that children need to develop as readers. And it's really designed to identify students that are at risk for reading difficulties, but it also gives teachers valuable data that they can use for instruction as well as intervention. And so student scores are calculated based on performance across these code-based subtests that you see here on the left. And the student scale score tells us whether or not students are at risk for reading difficulties, but it also shows growth over time, which the previous assessment for literacy did not. And the different weighted scores for each grade level indicate the student's overall band of risk. And there are 3 bands of risk. Low risk, meaning the student has no reading difficulties. Moderate risk, which means they have a few things to shore up and strengthen. And high risk, meaning the student does have risk for reading difficulties and needs intervention. And the resulting scores for all students fall into one of these 3 risk bands. And so those wristband ranges increase for each administration. So they increase in fall, mid-year, and spring. So I'd like to show you that again. So taking a look at the moderate wristband range here for a 1st grade. You see that in the fall, the scaled score was 604 to 629. And at mid-year, that increases to 630 to 645. And you see in spring, it increases again from 650 to 661. So using that 1st grade example here, let's look at a 1st grade student. So here you can see this 1st grade student in the fall scored a 635, which put the student in the low risk band area. And in the mid-year assessment, this student increased by 5 points, which is wonderful. But because the scaled scores increase also, this student is now in the moderate risk. And then in spring, that student gained another 5 points in the assessment, which is also wonderful, but it does increase that you see in high risk band in spring increases. And so that student is now high risk going into 2nd grade. So you can see that the assessment material gets harder and rigorous, as well as the wristbands changing as well.
And this is that change from just showing progress, which the student did, but now you have to actually show
Right.
achievement.
Right. It has to show progress in those areas of those subtests. and they increase in rigor. They're not the same, so they increase as the students should be increasing according to that grade level at that point in time.
Now, does this test also do, depending on how the student answers a question, the computer program decides whether it's going to get a harder question or an easier question?
Somewhat. It does have specific, it doesn't want to hit a ceiling because it wants students to be able to show growth, but also not master that assessment in that subtest area. So it does somewhat, but it does also have different weights. So there's really a formula that we really don't have access to that, but it does have each part of that subtest has certain weights more than the other subtests that equal the scaled score. And so let's take a look at the spring results for kindergarten. So this is the same data dashboard for VALS that I shared with you previously before. This is kindergarten. If you see any pink that has no number there, that is because that is less than 3% and it doesn't show up on the scores there, but it's about 1 or 2 students. So I'll walk us through this dashboard for this first one. So you can see here in the fall, 787 students participated in the fall assessment in kindergarten. 39% were at low risk, 37 moderate risk, and 24% were at high risk in the fall. But then you see here at the bottom here, you can see spring results. So for our spring, we had 796 students tested in kindergarten. 80% were at low risk at spring for VALS in kindergarten. Isn't that wonderful? And you can see that 10% were at moderate risk. Remember, that's not below. And then 10% at high risk compared to 24% in the fall. So they really have showed growth. And then here on the dashboard, you can see our fall and spring results for each school for both administrations. So kindergarten's made great gains. You can see all that green. And a couple of schools only had 1 or 2 students, such as Dare Elementary or Waller Mill, that only had 1 or 2 students in the high-risk band at the end of the year. And then at the bottom here, you can see the demographics or our student groups for kindergarten. And some notes here that some reporting groups like Hispanic and Economic Disadvantage and English Learner, they reduced the percentage of students at high risk almost in half from fall to spring. And so with first grade, our spring results. So here you can see our first grade dashboard with the data for both fall and spring. So we see that we had 906 students tested in first grade with 78% low risk as compared to 55% from the fall. And again, you can see the green increasing and the pink is decreasing with 11% at moderate risk and then 11% at high risk in first grade as compared to 16% in the fall. And here's our individual school results compared with fall and spring. A couple of schools, again, like Bethel Manor and Mount Vernon, only had 2 to 3 students that were at high risk at this point of year. And here at the bottom, you can see our demographic areas. So we have our students here showing growth. You can see a lot of movement. You can see that we had students, EL, English Learner, and Black students who decreased their high risk about 10 percentage points. And our students with disabilities also doubled the number of low risk from the fall to the spring in first grade. And for our second grade results, we had the dashboard here, which you see our fall and spring results with 908 students participating in this assessment, 71% at low risk compared to 46% from the fall, and 16% at moderate risk, and 13% in the spring were high risk as compared to 19% in the fall. And then here on the dashboard, you can see our school individual data as compared to the fall. And you might notice that Magruder and Waller Mill and Mount Vernon reduced the percentage of high risk from the fall to spring by at least 10 percentage points. That's great. And the demographic areas that you see at the bottom there, I noticed that percentage of English learner students in low risk, or the green, in the spring more than doubled from the fall. And our students with disabilities made a great gain with the 11 percentage point decrease from the percentage of high risk from fall to spring. So on this slide, you see another look at just the high risk data for each grade, kindergarten through second grade. And as previously mentioned, students in the high risk are at the greatest risk for reading difficulty and should have a student reading plan. But you can see here also that our kindergartners made the most decrease in the number of high risk from fall to spring. And remember, in the fall, our kindergartners come to us with a variety of learning experience, some with many learning experiences before kindergarten and some with just a few. And both first and second grade made an approximate 6 percentage point drop in the percentage of high risk from the fall to spring. Now, this is a new slide that I haven't shared in previous VALS presentation. Here is the percentage of students in high risk band at both the state, fall and mid-year, and York County School Division data. So Virginia Department of Education hasn't provided the spring comparison yet, but as soon as they do, we will provide that in Friday notes. But as you can see by this comparison, our division's percentage of high-risk students is much lower than the state, almost by half for each grade. And I spoke to the Virginia Literacy Partnership out of UVA just last week to ask them a few questions. And they did say they have learned a lot from this assessment in this first year, and they plan to really provide additional resources, make a few tweaks, but really provide additional tools for teachers to use with for next year with the VALS. And we, as a division, also have learned a lot with this assessment. I'd like to show you a few things that we're going to do to leverage VALS data for our students to support. So we'll be providing families with resources and materials to use over the summer for students that are at high risk. But also, I use this data to identify students for summer academy or summer school, and then be able to use this new spring data in that area for summer school. But also, we'll have this data right away in the fall. Teachers will have it at their hands, the tools, the reports, so they'll be able to get started and have a jump start with those targeted, explicit instruction on the students that need with areas of need, but also before that first fall VALS assessment, so right away. And then we'll also be making adjustments using this data. For example, we'll be aligning our kindergarten through second grade standards-based report card to align with VALS, but also any additional professional development that we need to provide for teachers in areas. And I might have mentioned this before, but next school year, we're required by the state to assess all 4th, 5th, and middle school students that are at risk with the VALS assessment. So that is going to be fabulous. We've never really had that kind of information. And we're going to need to include that in our division literacy plan.
And each of those students who are at high risk will have a reading plan.
Yes.
Question for you, as far as for over the summer, say that you have a child that just made it into the moderate risk. Could they request some assignments and stuff for over the summer?
Absolutely. I mean, our teachers more than likely would be talking with parents about what are those summer opportunities and giving them materials they can work for. On our webpage and on the state webpage are also some additional resources for parents. We've done a lot to build that up as part of our division literacy plan.
Gotcha.
And also, we've done this for quite a bit of time, but any third graders that at the end of the year are below grade level, the reading specialist and usually the teacher meet with that family and provide them a bag full of resources to take to use. We've been doing that for quite a bit of time as they leave third grade if they're below.
We also provide a summer academy for parents on literacy.
Mm-hmm.
We do a family engagement night, so families can come, and we have quite a few families who come to that, so.
Are the extra resources and additional interventions, are they just a repeat of what's been done all the year, or are they different, basically differentiated instruction because they haven't gotten it through the year?
So the resources that we provide them for the summer is definitely according to this spring data. So the spring data shows the subtest areas that they need. They'll provide resources specific to those areas. But the interventions is really data-driven. So using the VALS data at the fall, mid-year, and spring to fill those gaps, but also to look at progress monitoring in those areas. So
But are they the same methods as what's been done all year long, or are they looking at different ways of reaching those particular areas because they've already gone through one method during the school year?
Right.
If they haven't gotten it through that method, are the interventions and extra resources different methods to see if there's a better way of reaching them, or is it just repeating?
They are usually different because the Virginia Department of Education has given us an intervention list to use. So there are lists of approved programs that are specific to a variety of needs. So they have some specific to comprehension, some specific to very decoding, and some of a combination of those.
Okay.
So that list is also available on VDOE.
And some of that is with, like, the reading specialist will work specifically with certain students on top of, in addition to what they're getting with their general education teacher.
Okay, great, thank you.
It's all outlined in that student reading plan that is, the parents sit and go over
And it's
with
our
the family.
part of. And then, as I mentioned, the division literacy plan, about this time last year, I went over that new required division literacy plan with you. It was for K to 5. But now the state is requiring us to update this plan by June 30th to make it a 2-year or biennial plan. And this 2-year plan needs to include how the VALs will be implemented for 4th, 5th, and middle school, but also those interventions that are going to be used, the supplemental materials, and anything that we've added for interventions, such as we've learned that we've, through the data, that we needed something very specific for our students with disabilities, so we are adding such an intervention that's on that list for students with disabilities. So that division literacy plan outlines all of that to include the middle school, things that we're going to do in middle school for those students. And I provided that in Friday Notes a couple of weeks ago, but I also posted that division literacy plan update to the board docs for today's work sessions. And so that concludes the VAL's presentation. For this first year of implementation, I also want to add that this was a big year for literacy in our division. We've had the VLA implementation. Our elementary teachers have had the HMH new program to use. We've had the teachers have had required Virginia Literacy Act professional development modules to use where they've learned the updated research on reading. And we've had the VALs, new interventions. I want to just applaud our teachers and all that they've learned this year and used, and our coordinator for English, Molly Brown, and the literacy coaches. The teachers have done a fabulous job, as you can see, as well as our students. So.
Those tremendous gains really are good.
That was a great presentation because it's totally different from the assessments we did before.
Yeah.
This is doing it a totally different way, and it's really focusing on what the student needs.
Right, and growth over time.
And growth over time.
You can see from
exactly.
that.
So, yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Does that program, I know when I saw at the high school and middle school, they were using Lexia to drill down to the specific area where a child is really struggling. In this program, at the elementary level, is there something in there too where they drill down to the specific?
It does. So there's many sub-tests that we had showed before on the code base, but there's more in addition to that where it really drills down on very specifically where the student is having difficulty, whether it's encoding, which is spelling words, decoding, which is sounding out words, passage comprehension, fluency. So it really digs deep so that teachers know exactly where intervention is, to where to dig in and to really give them that targeted explicit instruction. So
That's great stuff.
I remember from the last presentation how much this program will bring and does bring to the students and teachers. Just want to say congratulations to all of you for such a great results that you guys posted and that our students achieved. We will miss you. Thank you so much for all of this. Thank you.
my pleasure. And I look forward to seeing that, it's implemented by 4th through middle school in the same kind of way. So
I'm so excited, because I was always looking, what's the next, how it's gonna look like, and this just shows us, because we had improvement in the mid-year, and now it's the fall, the spring, we kind of wrapping it up in a really good note, so thank you for that.
Do you have questions? All right.
thank you.
So our next presentation is on our strategic plan. Dr. Chandler can tell us a little about that. Is that right?
Yeah, before I do, I just wanted to wish Christina Head well. We have her retirement gala tomorrow, I believe, at Seaford Elementary School. So we look forward to going there and sharing some stories and celebrating her. So Christina, thank you for everything you've done. She said she had to be in bed by 6, so if you want to head out. All right, our next presentation Dr. Wrights, our Chief Human Resource Officer, and Dr. Aaron Butler, Director of Student Services, are going to provide an update on strategic initiatives and progress in improving school climate and working conditions for FY 2025. Neither of them are retiring, so they both have a ton of pressure on them tonight. Dr. Wrights?
Thank you, Dr. Shandor. Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for this opportunity to present a strategic plan update on school climate and working conditions for FY '25. Of course, our priority that it supports is supportive culture to provide safe, welcoming, and caring environments in which all students and staff have a sense of belonging and purpose, which then leads into our theory of action. If we create student-centered learning in safe, positive, and well-maintained schools and workplaces focused on student and staff growth, then team members will be well-equipped to foster a sense of belonging and purpose. In our strategic plan, YCSD makes a promise to provide a safe, welcoming, and caring environment in which all students and staff have a sense of belonging and purpose. And of course, this promise is rooted in research. And the research is on this screen where teachers are more satisfied and plan to stay longer in schools that have a positive work context independent of the school's demographic characteristics. Another research is there are strong connections between school climate and academic achievement of students. A work environment characterized by a positive working conditions has a direct relationship on employee retention. And the majority of employees, 94%, report that they would stay with an employer longer if it invested in their career. Current research shows that a positive school climate and job satisfaction is strongly linked to employee engagement as defined on this slide. In order to measure our promise, these three tools are used. The one is the Virginia School Survey of Climate and Working Conditions. The other is our Power 10 survey, and our newest is our Pulse survey, which we use every month. And those definitions and descriptions of those collection tools are on the screen. So here's a timeline. So in November 2024, all schools received the VDOE Working Conditions Survey. And then in January 25, students in grades 4 through 12 received the YCSD, our Power 10 survey. And then in February, all staff and students in grades 6 through 8 received the VDOE Climate Survey. So in between those surveys, we do our Pulse survey on the months that we don't deliver those other surveys. So our today, June 2nd, our last Pulse survey went out to staff to gather more information. We're going to talk about the Pulse survey in a few minutes.
I have a question. Are these surveys anonymous other than saying they're student or staff or faculty?
Great
Or
question.
are their names connected?
And I'm going to answer that in a minute.
Okay.
Okay. So this one is our staff working conditions, our school-based Power 10 that we received. And so this data is, the green lines are our instructors and the blue lines are staff. And the ratings go across in the key categories. So our top rated areas from this one is safety. And the question was, I feel safe at my school. The second one is respect. My professional role is respected. And then physical environment. The physical environment of my workplace supports my work responsibilities. And then our lower rated areas were shared decision making. I contribute to decisions about educational issues at my school. We also have professional growth. The professional development I receive meets my needs. And then family engagement. The school does a good job of encouraging family engagement. These results are shared with schools, and each school can filter results when developing their next steps. This is our trends. So we take the trends of 2022 to 23 and the 23-24 and 24 and 25 school year. So you can see we had an increase in responses from the previous year. The average and overall satisfaction has increased from the 23-24 school year. PD has stayed the same, and in the fall, Dr. Nichols is going to report out our YCSD's efforts on how PD was provided this year and how we have also surveyed our staff so we can help match what PD is needed for our teachers and staff. This group consists of paras, office staff, custodians, nurses, and all other non-licensed instructional staff. And we had an increase of responses from the previous year also. The average and overall satisfaction has increased from the 23-24 school year. And this is our non-school-based, and this is the working conditions for that subgroup. And the top three was a caring environment where adults at this department care about students. Safety, I feel safe at my work location, and supportive environment, I feel supported by other adults in this department. This is the trends for the non-school-based. So last year we had 88 responses, and this year we had 71 more responses. And the top three groups responding for this category was our instruction department and special education, our IT department, and our maintenance. And there was a noticeable improvement from the 22-23 school year, but for the 23-24 there was a slight decline, and that occurred in the 24 and 25. Which our current score is 4.89 out of a 6-point scale, which is still above our 22-23 levels and below the previous year's levels peak. I love this slide. Isn't it fun to look at? But it really tells a story. So that's why I put it up here, because I think it tells a story when it comes to our pulse surveys. So we just started our pulse surveys this year, and we're really excited about the information that it gives to our schools. So each month we invite team members to answer 5 brief questions. Again, I said that went out today. Developed to enhance our workplace and better respond to the needs of our staff. By participating, you can influence continuous improvement in our division. So each month we receive around 300 replies. And on this slide, you're able to see the highs and lows across the months by response groups, which makes it easier to see outliers and determine trends. So I'm going to give you an example. Look at the top blue line, which is Bethel Manor. And in December, the overall satisfaction was high, but in March, it dipped, and then it jumped back up in May. So results are shared monthly with schools and departments. The pulse survey is anonymous, and there is a free response question in which employees have an opportunity to leave a comment to help supervisors target and address staff concerns, celebrations, and climate issues. The monthly results will help form trends if the same occurring theme is presented. And the process allows for items to be addressed sooner in the year than lingering all year long. And now let's drill down to the data and look more closely at our high schools. This is an example of trends for a high school over a year. So looking at the outlier, that pink line, which allows us the opportunity to work more closely with that school in December to help address why there was a dip. Pulse surveys allow us the opportunity to address concerns in a timely and intentional manner. This one is our non-school-based pulse survey, and we have 2 groups represented here. One is the maintenance, transportation, and IT, and the other is our SBO departments. There are many ways for us to disaggregate this data where we could take it and we could pull it out by zones, we could pull it out by departments for us to look at it at a more closer look. And we went from September to October, November, December, March, May, and of course today, June is our last pulse survey, which we will collect that data. Now I'm going to turn over and transition to student data, and Dr. Butler is going to walk you through that.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. So for our student climate surveys, as Dr. Rice has shared, there's 2 metrics we use for that. One is the Virginia Secondary School Climate Survey, which alternates between high school and middle school. The other survey is the Power 10 we use for the strategic plan. So our key components that we look at the areas of safety, we look at relationships, teaching and learning, and then institutional environment, so looking at respect, fairness, and the rules. So the questions I'm going to focus on this afternoon, we pulled these out, was the sense of belonging. I feel like I belong at this school. Safety, overall, I feel safe at this school. Caring environment, adults at this school care about me. And then for student discipline, the consequences for breaking school rules are the same for all students. When you look at the survey results, we had 8,040 students that took the survey, which was a good representation of our schools. And I will actually go into the different levels. We'll do elementary, middle school, and high. The overall satisfaction was 4.69, and this is on a 6-point scale, with 6 being strongly agree and 1 being strongly disagree. So we do believe, looking at the data, we do have strong indications that we do have a positive school climate, but we have to drill down a little further to see which areas are growth areas and what's our trend data for the division. So when we look at for our elementary schools, this is only for our 4th and 5th graders. So you can see there were 1,972 students who did take this assessment. And when we look at the trend data for the 3 areas, we see that in the area of safety, ranked as one of our higher ones, where again, students did feel like they were safe in their buildings. When we look at the area for student discipline, we see a similar trend that is very much consistent to where it was back in 2023-24. Sense of belonging is one of the major things we've been looking at. Mrs. Hofstetler did a presentation where she focused on how connected are our students when we look at student activities and extracurricular activities. And we can see that that's a strong rating of 4.87. And then one of the higher marks was caring environment, where we have students who at 5.18 said there was caring adults in their buildings. When we get to our middle schools, we had 2,630 students that did take this assessment, and it was at 4.70 for the survey. When we start going in to look at some of the highlights from that data, we see a very similar trend. We see that in the area of safety, at a 4.86, our students do feel like they're safe in their buildings. When we look at student discipline, there was an interesting dynamic going on. So the year before, it had dipped down to a 3.96. And so our middle school principal were really trying to dig in to figure out why the students have a perception that discipline practices weren't the same for all students. So they spent a lot of time this year with the town hall meetings at the beginning of the school year. They did reinforcement meetings at the mid-year point, and even going into this last stretch before the last 30 days of school, when we got back from spring break, they did another refresher on expectations and rules. And so you see when we look at that data that it did go up. It's not as high as it was back in 22-23, but it's in an upward trend. One of the things we also want to look at is respect, and that is saying that students are treated with respect by staff members, and that was consistent with where it had been in years previous. And then the caring environment is also consistent. Our high schools, we had 3,438 students that took the assessment. You will notice that their overall satisfaction rating is less than both elementary and middle school at 4.37. And so when we went down in more detail to determine what those ratings were a result of, safety is one of the things that ranked highest with 4.71. However, student discipline did come up as one of our lower marks. Even though it's a little bit higher than it was the previous school year, it is still at 3.53, which was the lowest of all 3 levels. The same thing, we see that same pattern for student behavior at 3.85, which was slightly less than it was the year before, but also lower than the division average. For sense of belonging, that's been consistent with a 4.37. So students do feel like there's connections they have with school. And we do know at the high school, they have greater opportunities for Virginia High School League, also with the different extracurricular activities. And then for a caring environment, they did stay consistent with last year's scores, feeling that there are adults in the building that care about them and make attempts to make them feel wanted at each school. So our next steps based on that data, Dr. Shandor had worked very strongly with our building administrators and Mrs. Hofstetler to focus on student advisory groups to make sure that students have input in how the school is overall. So they pull in different groups of students to get feedback on how they can make improvements to overall school culture, also to academics and rigor. All of our schools, as I shared back in March, have a school-based MTSS team, and they really drill down to look at discipline. So every month they look at discipline data. They also look at the different trends when it comes to school safety to see if there's certain things they should do differently. Maybe they need to do some refinement. Maybe they need to do some more reteaching. Maybe they need to have more assemblies that focus on specific things, such as if vaping is an issue in the building. How are they going to reteach and how are they going to provide training for our students on those type things? Our student connection coaches have made a real big difference when it comes to make sure students are coming to school on a consistent basis, but not just coming to school. Also, they focus on, are they connected to school in some positive way? And so that's one of the greatest things they have been doing. Our division-wide professional development, we're going to spend a lot of focus this year. Dr. Skinner has allowed our team to integrate many of the practices that go back into how do we create caring environments, but also be consistent with discipline practices to make sure that we're being in alignment with the student code of conduct, because no one wants to go to a school where they feel like there's chaos or there is a toxic environment. So really focusing hard on consistency with rules, on consequences, and on being consistent with how we apply the sanctions across the board. We'll also be looking at Leadership Academy to focus more on our individual school data so they can make corrections. And this will all be put into their school improvement plans or their SIPs that they do on an annual basis. So we do thank you for this opportunity to provide updates on the working condition and student climate survey. We're available for questions at this time.
I wanted to offer a comment. I noticed that in all those slides, I was looking at it earlier today, that safety is just really up there as far as everybody across the board, students, staff, everybody feeling they are safe. And that warms my heart, especially given all of the, chaos that goes on in the world today and all the things that come up, with the schools. To see that, really shows that everything that we're doing, that we can possibly do at this level, is working to make people feel safe. And safety is one of those basic needs. So if you don't feel safe, everything else is gonna hold down. So that makes me feel good as a board member.
Is it possible, for future, when you do these reports, and it's a lot of good information, when you list the average number of respondents, can you also put out of the total available, for the elementary, middle, and high school? So that we can see if we have 2,607 or the number of respondents, or the average number, what was the total that was from?
For the total, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Yes, we can do that. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is everybody given, the survey in this is just up to the student if they want to complete it, or how does that work?
So for the student climate survey, families can opt out for the Virginia Department of Education survey. So we send out those opt-out forms. And so as long as parents don't sign that, then yes, then the students are given an opportunity to share. If they choose that they, for some reason, don't want to take it, then of course that we don't force them to take it, but we do make it open to all students who their parents have agreed it is fine for them to take the survey.
Quick question, as far as the advisory groups, are we gonna have for each of these categories that is on lower end, student advisory? Because I'm looking at the college and career life readiness on high school and middle school. I understand middle school is going, but in high school it's pretty, it's on the lower end of what we have. So what is it that they're saying that we're missing? Maybe.
I can want me to tell the
Oh, sure.
question.
Yes.
The question is, teachers at this school often connect what I'm learning to life outside the classroom. So it's one prompt question, and so I think there's some work to do about making sure what we're learning is relevant and the why around that. And that's good information for us as we're working with teachers and professional development. Principals are working with their teachers about explaining that why and connecting the learning to the things that are important in their life. Why do I need to know this? It's that question that we all go back to, right?
Yeah, I went the whole day and didn't use geometry, so.
Question.
All right, anybody else?
All right, thank you guys. All right, our last presentation is FY26 meal prices. Dr. Carroll's going to provide some information related to his recommendations for the meal prices. Dr. Carroll?
Thank you, Dr. Shandro. There we go. First of all, I'm not going to bury the lead. We have not received the paid equity tool this year from the USDA. It lagged a little bit last year and it's gotten even later this year. We have not received it. However, our surplus funds are so sufficient, we are confident that we can recommend no increase to meal prices for next year. So that's the bottom line. But I want to talk a little bit more about how we go through that determination. So when we sit down to talk about whether we're going to raise prices or not, we look at what are the things that are probably going to increase in cost. And those are our labor costs. Like next year, we know they'll have a 3.5% raise. Food is unknown, but inflation is easing right now. And commodities are those foods supplied by the US government. And they too could have some raise in prices, but that's unknown at this time. Also, we've had since COVID a subsidization from the federal government for supply chain costs and increases. That was already pre-planned to end with this school year, and I think that was to the tune of about $230,000. So that subsidy is ending this year. We've also, we factor in, we don't want to put off not raising prices too many years in a row because we don't want to do what, I know there's a division up near Richmond that increased from 25 cents a meal going into next year. So we try not to just drop a big price on them. So we're always looking down the road there also. And then the last thing, which kind of fights against it, which is a good thing, is the impact of meal participation. We've had a steady growth in meal participation. So our partner Sodexo is doing a great job. More and more students are eating both breakfast and lunch. And so from that, then our reserve fund grows.
I have a question.
Yes.
With the, I guess it's law now that is eliminating the artificial colors in school foods. Do we know yet how that is going to be implemented and how that's going to affect the costs?
No, I haven't heard anything on that front. I don't think that, the companies that create food have to figure out what their substitutes are. I don't know what.
It's an FDA thing, not
Yeah.
a school.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
it.
so that may be down the road, and I don't know what the time limits are on that.
Okay.
We do have another thing, and that is that there's been a Buy American effort that's been on the books for a while also. And so we can't buy any more than 10% of our food that is not from American suppliers. And that's been for a few years, and that will continue. At 10%, I don't anticipate any tariff issue. If there would be, that would be nominal. And then I think it's 2030 or 2031, that's going to go down to 5%. And so they'll have to identify it. And when we have audits, they really look for those things. I think we took one case last year that we shouldn't have in an audit last year that popped up. So we got cited for that one case of cans of something. All right. So our reserve fund status, as I said, is, and when I say this is in excess of the 3 months that we're required to keep for operating costs. So we have that 3-month reserve balance. We also, the surplus above that stands at 1.8 million as of today. And we have that, and we're trying to work, and we have been on aggressively addressing the reserve fund that we built up during COVID. And at the highest, it was at 6.05 million. And Cheryl Parr back there and Greg Dolak and his team have been aggressively trying to buy new replacement kitchen equipment and improving the equipment that we have to provide lunches and breakfast. And so now that's gotten us down to the 1.8 million. We still need to spend that down, and we have planning right now that accounts for at least $1 million of that, and they're continuing to explore options there. But once again, we feel that we still have the room that in case we did have an overage, we'd be fine as far as our balance. And then once again, I mentioned those meals. They've increased 81,000 meals were served. This was FY 22 to 24. We served 81,000 more meals 2 years later after FY 22, and that was a 6.6% increase. Now this year, on a per meal basis, we've increased about 3%. We don't have the totals yet, and we'll get those at the end of the year. But on a per meal basis, 3% increase over last year. But we also lost 8 days to weather this year, so that's having an impact. But still, once again, we feel comfortable with where we're at. So once again, I'll come back to the first slide in the sense that here are the meal prices that we are recommending for next year. These are the same as last year, and we just add one note that the reduced meals the last 2 years have been 30 cents and 40 cents respectively, respective of breakfast and lunch. However, we have had no guidance from USDA on that. We don't know if that'll continue or not, so that's to be determined. And that concludes my report, and I welcome any questions you have.
Thank you.
Okay.
You were saying actually, like out of the surplus, we are looking to spend another like 1 million.
Million.
What is it for again?
Different kitchen equipment across the
Equipment.
house. You know, we've got 18 kitchens, so.
Okay.
Yeah, for instance, last summer, we double or triple sized the walk-in freezer at Tapp High School.
Walk-in freezers, serving lines, combination ovens, we've been working across. And we'll pick one type of thing, let's say those ovens, and we'll work through those, and then we'll work through the freezers. And we still have some of that work to do. So, and it's really been dictated more by our capacity to do that work with our own staff. That's kind of, and supply chain issues between the two. We've been trying to do it as aggressive as we can between those two constraints.
Thank you.
All right, board members, we now move on. We got to discuss the board meeting calendar. If you've had a chance, hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. If not, if you could pull it up.
We'll pull it up.
Okay.
Is that a different?
No, it's
Yeah,
not.
just, you're gonna have to go on and pull it up on YC, or Board Docs, sorry.
We're ducks? Okay.
Yeah, we'll give Dr. Carroll just a second to do that. Maybe we'll let Ms. Goff help.
I'm gonna let Ms. Goff. Wasn't ready for that audible. There.
Thank you, Ms. Goff.
Yes, sir.
All right, here we go.
All right. Anybody have any, excuse me, any questions regarding the proposed school board work session and regular meeting calendar for 25-26?
I guess the only question I really had was at the bottom where it lists the NSBA conference to be determined, just to have it as notes. Didn't we separate from that back at the beginning of 2024 because that organization had called parents domestic terrorists, the ones who would question things at school board meetings?
I don't know if they necessarily separated. I think we haven't gone to that necessarily. There's the new one, which is called the
COSBA?
COSBA.
Yeah.
Which I think is the one, if I was gonna go to a national conference, that's the one I would go to. I wouldn't go to the national, but.
I think that, and I forget, I can't talk tonight, correct me if I'm wrong, these are just some of the proposed conferences that,
Yeah, I mean, this is
It's up to the board.
It's not-
TBD,
Yeah.
so
It's
if
up
you
to the
wanna.
board if they wanted to go, board
What-
member.
yeah,
Or if you wanna strike off, I can't see that far. Is it NSBA? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's at
Yeah.
the bottom.
Yeah, if you wanna cross off NSBA and just put national conference, then it could be
It'd be any
the other
national
group. Yeah,
conference.
that's fine. We can certainly do that.
if anybody, yeah, and these are all, I don't think anybody's gone the last couple years.
It's been several years. It's
Several
been,
years.
Since we've done
Yeah,
national.
since we've been, yeah.
yeah.
It's good networking, but it's been a long time since we've been.
Yeah, but I mean, that can be changed to reflect just a national conference. Other than that, dates, do they look okay?
No good, man.
I don't know if you,
Yeah, May and December, that's the two that are out of whack.
Well,
right,
Yeah.
so
Always.
that's.
Yeah.
Other than
And
that.
we've doubled December and doubled June.
Mhm. So it's pretty much the same as before, but just shifting dates.
Right.
Okay, so I believe,
There you go.
So we'll update that and when you vote it's a Word doc, so we could update what we just said and make it national conferences before you vote on it at the next meeting.
okay, so we'll vote on it the next.
Yep.
Okay.
Special meeting.
Yep.
Question on that also, do we want to add in any of the others? You have VSBA, I think.
Sorry?
Can you pull that back up, please?
VSBA. Sorry about that.
Oh, you mean put up the VSBA conference?
Well, I was trying to see what the VASBO,
That's VAS and VASBO, so.
that's superintendents. Okay.
So it's myself and Mr. Bowen. That's just, we put those dates of the conference so that everybody knows where we're at. Dr. Carroll has typically sat in on one or two meetings that I'm not here.
Okay.
I would share that's the history of those notes are simply to explain dates that may not work for meetings to occur. So it's
Right.
not that you're
Okay.
voting, you're not really voting on the notes, they're just there to provide information.
Right.
To let us
When
know
you
of
do
possible
vote.
conflicts.
Correct.
Thank you.
That is what that's there for.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, so then we'll move on to our next discussion. So I've spoken with some of you regarding how we want to proceed as far as guidance to Dr. Shandor regarding survey for looking at Magruder's name change. Okay, and that was really to just assess from, the public in all our districts, what, their take on that is, it's just to have more information, okay? It's just another frame of information for us to use. And it looked like to me from some of the conversations that many of you liked the Engage survey platform. That is no extra cost, so we're not spending any extra money for it. The nice thing, it can be used only once, which I think we agreed that we only wanted people to respond one time.
Can we limit that one to just the York County? I'm just concerned if other people.
Well, it would be, I believe
outside the
that
area.
would be limited to just people that lived in districts 1 through 5, am I correct?
That's kind of hard.
So there will be a process where we can identify the limitation of those individuals whose email addresses we have. One way that we could, when I look at the community, so you would have graduates, alumni and such who may not actually be currently residing in York County but may have that connection to the school. So that would be where we would ask that one demographic question that I believe the board was asking.
Right.
And taxpayers
Connection.
as well as
Right,
which
correct.
district you're in.
Correct.
Okay.
So with not having email addresses to those individuals, that is the one factor that will be slightly different for it as far as not being able to control, but we can ask questions that help us indicate.
So through this survey, is it that we emailing people with the link or it's public link that they will click on it?
So thank you for asking that question. There are two methods that we can utilize internally. So for staff or those connected individuals that you identify as wanting to conduct the survey with, we can send them a unique link. So each individual gets one link. And then for those who are not already connected and have email addresses in us, it would be a public, but we have other means of ensuring that when they take it, it is only
So
one
basically
time.
name and address, is that,
We have multiple opportunities. We can ask zip code, we can ask address,
Okay.
those types of questions that we could ask. Because again, the zip code may be slightly different if they are
yeah, obviously.
Alumni.
23185 is for Williamsburg,
And
for
James
parts of James City County, because yours is, isn't it? Yep, and York County up there.
And again, it's only as clear as the individuals, what they choose to enter in there. I mean, we can geocache after the fact to determine potentially where, if we somehow received an abnormal number of surveys in Vermont,
Right.
Right.
we would be able to identify that that was occurring.
So to get to your question, I think you discussed about anonymity and not wanting it to be anonymous, like we need to
I don't
have
want it to be
complete
anonymous.
transparency here.
Transparency.
Can we have that? So we don't have these anonymous, but we have transparency with the surveys.
The platform does allow a question that is demographics where they could enter a name, but again, verification of that.
Right. But you can't force a person to put in
A correct name.
Correct name.
But the idea is, as opposed to just a platform that doesn't have that at all,
Right.
you could end up, with, when it's totally anonymous, you don't know where it's coming from.
Right. At least we're gonna have district, we can drill down to some of the important specifics.
Okay.
Is that okay? That, it might not, give us exact name per se. I mean, some people don't mind
I'd
putting
like
their
to see
name.
the overall county
Right.
and then my district especially.
And I think that was the other point here that we can find out about who is in the Bruton zone versus other zones. We can look at the whole county and then we can look at it
Cool.
by the zone of Bruton, and we'll have a lot of different information.
We would have two ways to conduct that. One could simply be asking the zone they live in, but again, we want to try to limit the number of questions we ask.
Yeah,
So
too many could be overwhelming.
because we can send a unique link, we could send a unique survey to the Bruton zone and then send the alternate survey outside of those currently living in the Bruton zone, connected to the division.
Yeah, it needs to be for all of
It
all
will
of the
be.
districts,
It'll
mainly
be for
because
all
the,
the whole county.
you know, if one is changed, that may affect some of the other names, you know, as I've done research and apparently some other people out there have been doing research. Do we know the cost of a name change?
We haven't computed that yet. The last few weeks have been a little busy for all staff, so our plan was to get this survey out, and so we wanted to come up with a method first, so
Right,
it sounds like it's consensus for using the Engage survey platform, right?
yes.
Okay, so we have that, Catherine, you have that information. We also talked about unique survey links. We've talked about the Bruton zone versus the county as a whole. And then I think the last part was when. Our recommendation, as we've discussed this in cabinet, would have been to do that survey as soon as possible. I think we had some dialogue related to, well, it's the end of the year, we should maybe do it in the fall. And then we said, well, the fall starts and it's the fall.
Yeah.
So, and I also think you're sending a message that it's important and that you want to get this feedback. So our recommendation would be to do it now, to do it
I'm
before
okay
the
with
school year
now,
ends.
Yeah, I
I think we
like
set a
that.
7 to 10 day window. Catherine, best practices.
Typically, we do about a 10-day window.
Right.
We send the initial invitation and then we'll send one reminder, maybe a day or so before the it closes.
I really still think like name and address, in my opinion, would give us that geo, like, you know, will they
Yeah.
be honest with it? That's one thing, but like, you know, I think if you have name and address, you can see the repeats.
I agree.
That's just my,
I think with a way, I don't know all the IT ins and outs, but you have probably a way to screen all that through the program of looking for duplicates and things like that.
We do. Yes.
So we should be okay. So we've got all the details hammered out for that.
Yeah, and then once we have that information, to your question, Ms. Fairman, we'll certainly look at the cost and price of that. For the last couple of years, we've been working on changing some of our signage at our schools. I believe Grafton Bethel, Dare, Magruder, and there were a few other ones, Dr. Carroll, I can't remember.
Recruiter is one of those that is.
Magruder was one of
That's a
those
line
that,
for-
meaning putting like the actual sign on the school. Currently, when you face the school, there's an entrance here and an entrance there, just like Coventry, sort of same footprint. At Coventry, we put that sign up there a few years ago, but
Ours is out by 143.
right. Well, yeah, there's a sign out on the road, but we also wanted to do some signage on the building, so.
So that would still count as a cost, but it wouldn't be an additional cost.
Okay.
So-
But it's that whole plethora of all the different things that you have to change.
Right.
Well, we'll have, before we, as a board, make any decision, we will have that information in addition to survey information. Okay, all right,
Sounds good.
all righty, I think, thank you, everyone, for presenting this evening. We'll take a short break and we will begin the next meeting.
Yes, great job.
Probably do that summer.
All right, I call to order the June 2nd, 2025 special meeting of the York County School Board. Welcome back. We'll now begin the business meeting, but first I'd like to share the YCSD mission statement. The mission of the York County School Division is to ensure that every student is valued, supported, and challenged through learning experiences which prepare them for a successful future. We'll first start with our HR presentation by Dr. Rice.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Goodwin. Again, good evening, board members. Dr. Wrights is going to provide some information related to a pay plan update. Dr. Wrights?
Thank you, Dr. Shandor, members of the board, Madam Chair. I have two proposed pay plan updates for you to look at. One is the NJROTC. We are planning on making them having their own pay grade category to capture how NJROTC instructors are paid. And so we wanted to put that into pay plan as a separate category. And then we have the operational substitute pay increase, and that is to match our operational substitute pay for the budgeted positions for non-licensed and administrator pay scale, and those pay grades are over to the right.
Could you explain, just so everybody, even listening to everything, can understand, what is that difference between the NJROTC from a regular teacher or standard teacher?
So the instructors are paid upon hire, and the pay is proposed by the military. And so the military and the cost of living, and then they're placed on a teacher salary scale, and then thereafter. So really the military sets their salary, and then they get the cost of living based off of that.
Do they get funding from the military? Or is it's all from York County?
Bill, it's funding from the military.
We do receive some
Yes.
funding from the military.
Okay.
Yes, to supplement that, yeah.
That's what I thought. I just want to make sure I understood that.
And that is it.
Next, we'll move into financial matters. I will ask Mr. Pyavich to discuss those.
I have a claims for certified for payment for May 2025. We have significant expenditures for May, which include instructional regular expenditures total approximately $655,075. Includes payments to Ally Healthcare, Care Staff Partners, College and William Mary, Emily Hayes, Hatchet Vision Services, James Service Association, Lakeshore Learning, Macmillan Holdings, Maxim Healthcare Services, New Horizon, Audio Research Foundation, Pearson's Education, Plan B Academy, Purple Communication, Steve Wise Music, the Fison Center, the Stepping Stones, and Department of Education. Also Virginia Peninsula Community College and Washington Music Center. Payments for technology-related items total approximately $503,000 and includes payments to ACES, CDW, Cox Communications, Mid-Atlantic Installers, She Communications, and VA Business Systems. Payments for operations and maintenance for a total of $410,240 and includes payments to Cintas for fire protection, Dominion Energy, Hampton Roads Sanitation District, Republic Services, Riverside Paper, Riverside Physicians, Rollwood Associates, VIRCO, W. Griner, WB Mason Company. Transportation-related expenses include payments to the McCarthy Tire Company, that is for the 377 passenger buses. Payments for school nutrition services totaling $837,900 includes payments to Alto Hartley, Global Payments, Sadesco, and the Matthew Group. Payments related to capital projects total $871,542 and includes payments to APT Acquisitions, Continental Contractors, Mobile Lease, Simpson Unlimited, ZBZ and Associates. Now, consideration for approval of financial report for May 2025. We have significant changes relating to the operating budget, and for May revenues, the May revenues and expenditures have been posted at the time this report was prepared. State revenues is approximately $5.2 million higher in May FY25 when compared to the May of FY24. The change is due to the increase in students' enrollment at risk funding and the state's portion of the 5.5% compensation increase for FY25. Federal revenue is approximately $1.97 million less in FY25 due to the expiration of one-time ESSER stimulus grant in FY25. For expenditures, Expenditures for instructions are approximately 6.8 million higher in May 25 when compared to the May 24 due to the 5.5 increase in salaries, increase in employer health premiums, additional positions added for FY 25, and one-time bonus paid in May 25. Expenditures for transportations are approximately 1.3 million higher than, and expenditures for operations are about 1.5 million higher in FY 25 due to the increase in salaries, increase in employer health premiums, and one-time bonuses. Expenditures for technology have increased by 1.6 million due to the increase in salary and benefits, one-time bonus and transfer out of the $700,000 to technology reserve funds. Significant changes relating to the school nutrition budget. And again, this is posted only for the May revenues by the time this report is prepared. Total school nutrition revenue is down $456,758 in May of FY 25 when compared to the May of 24. The variance is primarily due to the timing of May 25 revenues postings. Total school nutrition expenditures are $247,157 higher, although not all May expenditures have been posted. FY 25 expenditures are projected to significantly exceed those FY 24. The increase reflects the planned spend down of funding balances with the school nutrition fund. Consideration of approval of Resolution 2535. Resolution 2535 requires the board approval authorization procurement of more than $100,000 and change orders greater than $50,000. There are 3 items on the resolution, all for fiscal year 26 and totaling $1,525,000, the details of which can be viewed on the board docs. Madam Chair, I now move to approve financial matters as listed.
I'll second.
Any questions or discussion? Ms. Howard?
A motion is made by Mr. Pyavich and seconded by Mr. Schaefer to approve financial matters as listed. Mr. Richardson?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Fairman?
Yes.
Mr. Pyavich?
Yes.
And Mrs. Goodwin?
Yes.
The motion passed 5-0.
I will now go over the consent calendar. All right. We have approval of personnel actions, approval of minutes from a work session on May 12, 2025, a regular meeting on May 19, 2025, and a special meeting on May 23, 2025. Approval of Resolution 25-37, a resolution to approve FY26 property and liability insurance coverage. Approval, the filing of the 25-26 ESEA application grant for funding for Title I Part A. Approval of the filing of the ESEA local application 2026 for grant funding for Title II Part A. Approval of the filing of the 2025-2026 ESEA application for grant funding for Title III Part A. And approval of the filing of the 2025-2026 ESEA application for grant funding for Title IV Part A. Approval of meal prices for school year 2025-26, approval of 2024-2025 annual progress report and financial statement for York River Academy, approval of HR updates, approval of the 2025-2026 board meeting calendar, dates only, approval of the division superintendent to execute the 16th annual addendum to the facility operating agreement between the county, school board of York County, Virginia, and the Boys and Girls Clubs of the Virginia Peninsula of Virginia Non-Stock Corporation. Approval to authorize the division superintendent to sell surplus equipment at public auction. Approval of student activity and overnight field trip for the York High School NJROTC. Approval of the consent calendar as listed. I'd like to have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar as listed.
Madam Chair, I move approval of the consent calendar as listed and as you read.
I'll second it.
May I make one comment?
Sure.
Under item M,
Yes.
which is the consideration of approval to authorize the division superintendent to sell surplus equipment at public auction, Dr. Carroll contacted Dewey Ray, who's the principal over at Horizons. You know, they have several automobile classes over there. So they're currently I think, reviewing. Dr. Kerr, if you want to share.
They came over and took a look, so there's 2 or 3 vehicles that they might be interested in, and we'll see if we can come up with a good accommodation for them. But so that they can use that as part of their curriculum. So we'll work with them after they give us a final decision on what they're interested in.
Thank you.
Should we amend that particular proposal on this or pull it out?
I would leave it, my recommendation would be to leave it because we still have to sell it.
It says sell, and then probably we'll charge them $1 or something like that.
Yeah.
Whatever's legal, whatever the legal counsel allows us to do.
I was just looking, since it said at public auction, that I would suggest amending that to remove at public auction, since that particularly requires that
Sorry,
if it's approved.
what are you talking about?
Say that again?
We don't know for sure.
It would just sell, on M, it says to sell surplus equipment at public auction, whereas if we're negotiating with possibly selling it to
It's
our
only a few
residents.
vehicles, like, there's a list of many that's provided.
So could we come back later if he decides on 3 vehicles and
Sure.
make a
Right.
motion?
Yeah, we can just leave them off and then come back and.
And do that, yeah.
Okay,
Hopefully by June 25th, you have a meeting, you have a retreat. Maybe we can bring it back there, but if we want to keep it this evening for the auction piece, that's great.
Yeah, you're authorizing it, but we won't go there until we know for sure.
okay.
All right, any other questions, discussion?
The only other comment that I have is, I don't have a problem with these other than the one special meeting was for a closed meeting that I believe 2 of us didn't attend. And, I looked at it, the minutes are just the basic minutes for having a special meeting and going into a closed meeting and then coming out and everything. But since I was not in attendance at that one, I just want it noted as such.
And then I would need a motion and a second to remove that from the consent calendar.
Or she just wants it noted.
No, I just want it noted.
Yeah,
She just wants it noted.
Oh,
She
you
wasn't
just want it-
there.
Just want it noted.
Oh, okay. All right,
So noted.
so noted. Okay, anything else? All right, Ms. Howard.
A motion was made by Mr. Richardson and seconded by Mr. Schaefer to approve the consent calendar as read by Mrs. Goodwin. Mr. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairman,
Yes.
Mr. Richardson,
Yes.
Mr. Pyavich,
Yes.
and Mrs. Goodwin.
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0.
We have no action items, we have no policy discussion, and we have no second reading. So at this time, I will say thank you to everyone for your input and for being here this evening. We'll be back in August. I hope everyone has a fun and relaxing and safe summer. We do have a closed session this evening. Can I please have a board member make a motion to take us into closed session?
I'll move that York County School Board convene in closed session to discuss personnel matters relating to the following discussion related to the appointment of a prospective candidate for employment to fill a principal vacancy pursuant to the personnel exemption at section 2.2-3711A1 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And as the matters addressed in closed session are confidential, no minutes or recordings are permitted.
Second.
Ms. Howard?
The motion was made by Mr. Schaefer and seconded by Mr. Pyavich to approve the school board to meet in closed session as stated. Mr. Richardson,
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairman,
Yes.
Mr. Pyavich,
Yes.
Mrs. Goodwin.
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0. You're in closed session.
Okey-dokey.